what is it, June or August, right? We're in August already. You know, when you're trying to keep count of cheetahs and functions, the mind gets a little bit crazy. Okay, so now we turn from feelings to the next subject in this chapter on the miscellaneous. This is called roots. And this is on starting on page 119. Okay, and I'm reading now in section number 5, the analysis of roots. And so the text says, in the compendium of roots, there are 6 roots, namely greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. Okay, so these 6 roots, I think all of us are familiar with, and the function of a root is to give strength to the citta, to the state of consciousness. So those states of consciousness, those cittas with roots, are said to be stronger than the states of consciousness without roots. And now 3 of these roots are exclusively unwholesome. That is greed, hatred, and delusion. The other 3 roots, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, they call them beautiful roots, but they're not exclusively wholesome because they occur not only in wholesome states of consciousness, but they occur of course, in wholesome states of consciousness, but they also occur in the functional states of consciousness of an arahant. Now, as I explained yesterday, the consciousness of the arahant is not called wholesome because the arahant doesn't create further karma. He's sort of cut off the foundations of karma. So his actions are like the flight of birds through the sky. They don't leave any tracks. So the arahant doesn't create karma. And in the Abhidhamma system, the word wholesome refers only to those states of consciousness or those actions that create karma. So the states of consciousness of the arahant are called beautiful or sobhana, but they're not wholesome. And so the roots in the arahant state of consciousness are, of course, they're beautiful roots, but they are karmically indeterminate, not wholesome, not unwholesome. And so they are occurring in the purely functional states of consciousness, and so they're not wholesome, not unwholesome. And the roots also occur, the wholesome roots also occur in resultant, I should say the beautiful roots also occur in resultant states of consciousness. That is, we'll see in the 8 beautiful resultant states of consciousness, in the resultant consciousness of the fine material sphere, in the resultant consciousness of the immaterial sphere and in the supramundane states of consciousness, that is, the fruits of the path of liberation. And so, maybe you could put it this way. So greed, hatred, delusion are always unwholesome. They occur only in the unwholesome states of consciousness. But the beautiful roots, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, if they occur in wholesome states of consciousness, they're wholesome. But they can also occur in resultant states of consciousness and in functional states, the states of consciousness in the arhat, in which case they're considered karmically indeterminate. Okay, then if we turn to page 120, to section number 6, then we find the classification of states of consciousness by way of roots, or we have the classification of the roots by way of states of consciousness. Okay, so if we look at the text, we see firstly that there are 18 types of consciousness without roots. Those are what we call the rootless states of consciousness. So we are familiar with those from the table on page 28. We see the 18 types of rootless consciousness. So of course those don't have roots. That is, well, here it's enumerated. The 5-door inverting consciousness, the consciousness that turns to an object when it first appears at a sense door. The 2 sets of 5-fold sense consciousness, that is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body consciousness, whether unwholesome resultant or wholesome resultant, those 10 are without roots. The receiving consciousness, which just accepts the object after it comes to the sense cognition, the consciousness that investigates, the determining consciousness, and then that rather mysterious, enigmatic, smiling consciousness of the Arahat. So all the remaining 71 types of consciousness have roots. And of these, 2 types of consciousness have only one root. These are the 2 that are rooted in strong delusion. That is the restless state of consciousness, the consciousness that's overwhelmed by restlessness, and the consciousness that's filled with doubt, with uncertainty. Okay, the remaining 10 wholesome types of consciousness and the 12 sense-sphere beautiful types of consciousness dissociated from knowledge have 2 roots. This is a total of 22. The other 10 unwholesome types of consciousness are 8 kinds which are rooted in greed. You see in the table on page 28, 8 kinds of greed-rooted chittas. Those chittas have 2 roots because whenever there's greed, underneath the greed is delusion. And the other 2 are the 2 rooted in hatred. Also, whenever there's hatred, underlying that hatred is delusion. So we speak of these as greed-rooted or hatred-rooted chittas, but along with the greed and hatred, what unites them is the presence of delusion. Okay, then amongst the sense-sphere beautiful types of consciousness, again, we look at the table on page 28. We see 8 sense-sphere wholesome, 8 sense-sphere resultants, 8 sense-sphere functionals. So each of these 8, among each of these 8, 4 are connected with knowledge, with wisdom, with understanding, and 4 are disconnected from knowledge, wisdom, or understanding. So those 4 that are, you see, what's called wisdom, knowledge, understanding, those are just different terms representing the root of non-delusion. So if there's no knowledge in the citta, no wisdom, no understanding, the citta is without the root of non-delusion. But since it's a beautiful or wholesome, a beautiful citta, it has the 2 good roots of non-greed and non-hatred. So that gives us 12 sense-sphere beautiful chittas dissociated from knowledge. And so together with the 10 unwholesome chittas that have 2 roots, we get a total of 22. Okay, then the 12 sense-sphere beautiful types of citta, the 12 sense-sphere beautiful types of consciousness associated with knowledge. Thus, the chittas that have knowledge, wisdom, understanding, that means that they have the root of non-delusion. Since though the root of non-delusion, though it's expressed negatively, but it means that there's understanding or some wisdom or knowledge in that state of consciousness. So we have those 12 have 3 roots. They have non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. And then the 35 sublime. The sublime means actually it should be the 35 sublime and supramundane types. That is the 27 sublime and the 8 supramundane. For a total of 47 have 3 roots. That is, all of the states of meditative absorption, the 5 jhanas, the 4 formless meditative attainments, always have the 3 beautiful roots: non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. And then So that's 15 fine material sphere citas, 12 immaterial sphere citas, and then the supramundane, the 4 paths and 4 fruits, always have the 3 beautiful roots: non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. So putting them all together, from 12 sense spheres and 35 sublime and supramundane, we get a total of 47 that have 3 roots. So you see, if we were having an election between the citas, or vote, to see which ones have 3 roots, which ones have either no roots or bad roots, the ones with the beautiful roots win. So it's 47 with beautiful roots against 42, which are either rootless or with 2 roots. Or actually, 47 have 3 beautiful roots. I think altogether 59 citas out of 89 have the beautiful roots, either 2 roots or 3 roots. And then you see how the roots are distributed in the table on page 121. So you see the 8 greed-rooted citas have greed and delusion. The hatred-rooted citas have hate and delusion. The 2 citas that have only delusion, those are the 2 delusion-rooted citas, have delusion. Then you see the sense sphere beautiful ones with knowledge have non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. The beautiful sense sphere citas without knowledge have non-greed, non-hatred. Then the sublime and supramundane all have non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. Let's go on. Okay, we'll just give 7 minutes for questions, because we have to cover the big topic of doors, objects, bases, all in one. Oh no, yeah, we have that in the later part of the afternoon. Okay.
Are all unwholesome citas rooted in delusion?
All unwholesome citas are rooted in delusion. You could see that whether it's greed-rooted, hate-rooted, or those 2 types called strong delusion-rooted, they all have delusion. This young man here?
Thank you, Bande. I have a question about the ones that have 3 wholesome roots, so non-delusion, non-greed, and non-hatred. You mentioned that the jhanas would have all 3.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, in terms of in the Buddha's time when there were other meditators who had attained the jhanas but lacked the penetrating insight that the Buddha attained, does that mean that they had those particular jhana factors, but they weren't, I don't know, how would you explain sort of the Buddha's sort of transcendent insight, but while the other meditators had the...
Yeah, what is called here non-delusion doesn't necessarily mean what I would call the special wisdom of the Buddha's teaching, the wisdom that leads to liberation. But it's some kind of, knowledge or understanding, in this case, of how to achieve the jhanas. It's an understanding would be of the unsatisfactory, well, that's actually part of the preliminary. It's a good question. It's a question that I've pondered, because in the jhana, the mind is just focused single-pointedly on an object without any kind of discursive thinking going on or active understanding. But they say that there's some knowledge or understanding within those jhanas, but it's not, the understanding of like dependent origination. impermanence, dukkha, non-self, that brings liberation. Okay, Prithvi? Yeah.
The same question I felt in the sutras, when Buddha practicing meditation,
Yeah.
he thought of the question he had, that if these wonderful jhanas giving rise to so much wonderful states of happiness, should I be comfortable with it? Should I not go something? So that question itself is a penetrating insight.
Yeah.
And then that's a breakthrough.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he divides, so that breakthrough he qualified as Paticcasamuppada and all that. There's an explanation of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then I think since there's no questions, we can move on now to the next. This is quite a big topic. And these are the doors. This begins on page 129, the compendium of doors. And the Pali word, interestingly, it sounds quite similar to the English word. The Pali word is dwara. So there's probably some etymological connection between the English word door and the Pali word dwara, since they're both belong to the Indo-Aryan family of languages. Okay, so now turning to the text, which begins section 12. In the compendium of doors, there are 6 doors: eye door, ear door, nose door, tongue door, body door, and mind door. The eye itself is the eye door, and so for the ear door, the ear is the ear door, the nose is the nose door, and so forth. But the life continuum, this is the bhavanga, is called the mind door. Now, what is a door? A door, well, if we just take literally the word door, if you are on the outside of a building, you want to go inside, you have to pass through the door. If you're on the inside of the building and you want to go outside, again, you have to pass through the door. So we can say that the door is the opening through which, or it's the means by which consciousness goes out to meet the object, or it's the means by which the object comes in order to meet consciousness. So consciousness meets the object through the door. Either you could see it either going up, working either way, consciousness going out and introducing itself to the object, hello object, I'm consciousness, or the object coming in through the door and introducing itself to consciousness, saying, hello consciousness, I'm Mr. Object. Okay, now what is meant when we say that the eye itself is the eye door and the ear itself is the ear door? Now, according to the Abhidhamma system, what we call the eye as a door is not this thing here, this ball of flesh. And what we call the ear is not these floppy things here. And what we call the nose is not this thing here. But inside the eye, sort of deep inside, there's said to be a subtle kind of matter which is called eye sensitivity. It's a subtle kind of matter which has the special function of being able to respond to lights and darkness and colors. This might be, in the terms of modern physiology, it might be, again, I'm not a physiologist with specialized knowledge of the eye, but it might correspond to the rods and cones. So all of this here is all designed to control the amount of light that comes through. It has variety of functions. It's a whole complex conglomerate of matter. But all of this is sort of supporting deep inside that sensitive matter, which is able to pick up lights, shades of light and dark and different colors. So that is called eye sensitivity. The Pali word is chaku. Chaku means eye. Pasada. Pasada means sensitivity. And so similarly, the ear is not this thing here, but deep inside here, there's some kind of material substance that is able to respond to vibrations in the air and turn them into audible sounds. So that is called ear sensitivity. Maybe this corresponds to something. Could it be the eardrum? Or the eardrum is concerned with balance? I'm not sure. Somebody might know better than I do. See, we have a doctor in the house. Excuse me? Okay. Okay, and then what's meant by the nose is, again, it's not this thing, because if somebody cuts this off, I could still smell. But it's something inside, maybe up here, which is able to pick up fragrances and to turn them into objects of awareness. Then what's called the tongue would probably correspond to the taste buds. That's an easy one. And then what's called the body as a door would be, it's spread out through the whole physical body. It's everything which is sensitive to tactile sensations. So those are the doors, the 5 physical sense doors. Then the mind door is the life continuum itself. Because when a mental process occurs purely through the mind door, without occurring through the sense doors, it arises from the bhavanga. And so the bhavanga is called the mind door. There is some debate amongst the commentators exactly what is the precise meaning of the mind doors. If you want to find out about that, there's some discussion of that here, but it's not really so important. First, we have to get the basics. Okay, now he goes into the classification of states of consciousness by way of the doors. This is in paragraph 13. He says, 46 types of consciousness arise in the eye door according to circumstances. There's the 5-door adverting, the eye consciousness, the receiving, investigating, determining, the sense sphere jhavanas, and registration. Likewise, in the ear door, and so forth, 46 types of consciousness arise. That is the 5-door adverting, ear consciousness, and then all the rest as in the eye door. Okay, now to see how 46 types of consciousness arise in the I door, we can go down to the guide to paragraph 13, and we see that what arises first in the I door is the 5-door adverting consciousness. That is, the mind is flowing along peacefully in its bhavanga state for half a second. Then some visible object comes into range. It's sort of knocking on the I door. It wants to come in. It wants to be cognized, to be recognized. And so it knocks on the I door. And the first thing that occurs in response to it is the arising of the 5-door adverting consciousness. This consciousness is like, let's use a simile. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 doors to Kuan Yin Hall. And we have somebody here is the receptionist. And so they are sitting here, and a knocking comes on one of the doors. So the receptionist has to listen and figure out in a split second which door somebody is knocking on. Is it the eye door, the ear door, nose door, tongue door, body door? So first, when a visible form is knocking on the eye, the 5-door adverting consciousness, which had maybe been reading the newspaper, hears the knock and wonders, what door is that? Then it goes to the eye door. Okay, immediately after that arises the eye consciousness, which, as I explained this morning, it's just like a camera. Just boom, just opens up, the opening of I don't know if those cameras work this way anymore. They open up like this, and then light and color comes in. So that's the way the eye consciousness works. It just opens up to the form that's appearing at the eye door. Then comes the receiving consciousness. You see, the eye depending on the form, it could be either the wholesome resultant or unwholesome resultant eye consciousness. Then comes one of the 2 types of receiving consciousness, unwholesome resultant or wholesome resultant. Then it can be one of the 3 kinds of investigating consciousness, which looks out in order to inspect what kind of form is that. So if it's a rather neutral form, then it will be either the unwholesome resultant or the wholesome resultant investigating consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. But if it's a really pleasant form, then it will give a jolt of joy to the investigating consciousness. So it becomes the joyful investigating consciousness. Then comes the determining consciousness, which is a functional consciousness. It's not wholesome resultant, not unwholesome resultant. It just performs that function of determining the nature of the object. And then come a series of jhavanas. If it's a very prominent object, there'll be 7 jhavanas. And it could be any of these jhavanas. The 12 unwholesome, the 8 wholesome, the 8 beautiful, functional chittas in the case of the arahat. Or it can be that puzzling, smile-producing consciousness of the arahat. And then if it's a very prominent object, it will be the jhavana stage will be followed by registration. And registration can be any of 8 types of consciousness. Or actually, it can be 11 types of consciousness fulfill the function of registration. That is, the 8 sense-sphere beautiful resultants and the 3 types of investigating consciousness also fulfill the function of registration. If you remember, still have the handout that I referred to this morning, you see that the consciousness called the 3 investigating consciousnesses in the middle column perform at least 2 functions, investigating and registration. The 2 with neutral feeling also serve as rebirth, bhavanga, and death, but they perform investigating and registration. So even though this is the I door, we have 46 types of consciousness arising in the I door, not only I consciousness. And similarly, in the ear door, nose door, tongue door, body door, 46 types arise in each. Okay, then going back up into the main paragraph on page 131, it should be understood that altogether the 54 types of sense sphere consciousness occur in the 5 doors. That is, when we have 46 types arising in the I door. In the other 4 doors, we have either unwholesome resultant or wholesome resultant. So that's 4 doors with 2 possibilities, that's 8. So 8 plus 46 is 54. Okay, now we come to the mind door. In the mind door, 67 types of consciousness arise. That's because the kinds of consciousness that constitute the jhanas, the formless meditations, and the supramundane paths and fruits don't occur through the sense doors. They always occur in the mind doors. And so we have 67 types of consciousness arising through the mind door. First is mind door adverting. Then we have 55 types of consciousness that perform the function of jhavanas. So that's 56. And then 8 types, 56. 11 types that perform the function of registration. And then if you go to page 132, where it says, in the mind door, in bold, it says, all 55 types of jhavanas occur in the mind door. Only 22 chittas do not occur in the mind door. Okay, 1 is the 5-door adverting consciousness, because that turns to one or another of the 5 sense doors. Then the 2 sets of 5-fold sense consciousness, by definition, don't occur in the mind door, because they are types of sense consciousness. The 2 types of receiving consciousness, which only occur through the 5 senses. The 2 types of receiving consciousness. Then this might be a little bit puzzling, but the 5 fine material resultants and the four immaterial resultants. Now, those types of consciousness don't occur in the mind door, because those types are what are called door-freed consciousness. Those types of consciousness only perform the functions of rebirth linking, bhavanga, and death consciousness. So for the beings in the fine material plane, in the immaterial plane, the fine material resultants and the four immaterial resultants, one or another depending on the realm of rebirth, one of these is the mind door for those beings. It's not a citta that occurs through the mind door, but it is the bhavanga for those beings. And so all of their active cittas emerge from the bhavanga. And so the explanation comes here that these 19 cittas are known as door-freed because their particular functions of rebirth, bhavanga, and death do not occur in the sense doors. And they do not apprehend, or they do not receive any new object, but they apprehend only that fixed object that arises with them at the moment of rebirth. Okay, then we'll have come to the classification by number of doors. This is paragraph 14. I just have to say, I know that this can cause heads to spin, and what was the expression you used? The brain was bubbling. But it takes time to get used to this style. Yeah. Okay, take the microphone.
Oh, thank you. Bhante, I hope I'm not going off track, but I'm wondering, does the bhavanga have anything to do with the physical brain? Because if there's 6 to 7 types of consciousnesses that arise in the mind door, the bhavanga is the mind door, and included in these consciousnesses is the registration. So how is it that there's no mention of the brain? Because in the discussion of the mind door, the bhavanga is the mind door and it recognizes objects. Now, if the brain is damaged, it's impossible to recognize objects or anything. Does that mean that the bhavanga is also, does the bhavanga suffer injury, and can it suffer injury, and why is it that if the brain is damaged, no cognizing can take place?
Okay, I think that's a good question, but I think we should hold it till we come to the section on bases. Then I'll try to deal with it then. And in that case, if I don't deal with it satisfactorily, then bring the question up again. Because there's a distinction between bases and doors. And the door for the mind door process is the bhavanga, not a physical organ. But we'll come at the end of this chapter is the section on bases, and that question is relevant to the bases of consciousness. Okay, so let us take the classification by number of doors. Okay. Okay, so it says here, this is section 14 at the bottom, of those that arise through doors, 36 types of consciousness have one door. The 36 types are the two sets of fivefold sense consciousness, like eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body consciousness. Well, eye consciousness arises only through the eye door, ear consciousness only through the ear door. And each is of two types, and so we get two sets of five sense consciousness. And then the sublime jhavanas, those are the jhavanas that occur in the states of jhana, the five jhanas, or the four formless meditations, and the supramundane jhavanas. All of those occur only in the mind door. We don't get a jhana consciousness occurring through the sense door, or we don't get the path and fruit occurring through the sense door. Sometimes a sense experience can set off the path and fruit. Like sometimes somebody listens to the Buddha give a discourse, and while listening, something the Buddha says will ignite the realization of the path and the fruit. Or somebody might see maybe a flame go out, or a sunset occur, or a cloud blowing through the sky, and then, boom, they get the path and fruit. But the path and fruit, though it's sort of setting off from a visual experience or an auditory experience, but the path and fruit are always mind door processes. Okay, so those types of chittas have one door. Then the three mind elements arise through five doors. I think this is the first time that he introduced the expression, the three mind elements. So what are the three mind elements? The three mind elements are, one is the five-door adverting consciousness, which can, of course, because it's five-door adverting, it can arise through any of the five sense doors. And then the other two are the two types of receiving consciousness: unwholesome resultant, wholesome resultant. Okay, then the joyful investigation, the determining consciousness, and the sense sphere jhavanas arise through six doors. Okay, the joyful investigation has one of its functions is to investigate an object coming through the five sense doors. So in that role, it's occurring only through the five sense doors, but it also has the function, the joyful investigating, of registration. And when it occurs as a registration consciousness, it can occur at the end of a mind door process. In that case, it's occurring through the mind door. So it's occurring through six sense doors. The determining consciousness has two functions. When we call it the determining consciousness, then it's determining the nature of the object at one or another of the five sense doors. But the same type of citta that performs the function of determining also functions as the mind door adverting consciousness. If you look at that sheet that I had printed for you, and then you go to, the technical name is the functional mind consciousness element, and you see that the two functions for that is determining the object at the 5 sense doors and adverting to the object at the mind door. So follow that? So it's one type of citta. For convenience, we call it the investigating consciousness. But this is like Dr. What was his name? Dr. William Taylor, who's, he's not in the hospital now, but he's coaching the Little League team. So, he works both at the hospital and on the baseball field. Okay, and then the sense sphere jhavanas can occur through any of the sense doors, either the 5 physical sense doors or in the mind door process. Okay, then the investigating consciousness, accompanied by equanimity and the great resultants, arise either through the 6 doors or as door freed. Okay, to understand this now, okay, first we'll take the investigating consciousness accompanied by equanimity. This can be either the unwholesome resultant or the wholesome resultant. It occurs through the 5 sense doors when it's exercising the function of investigating the object. It can also arise through the mind door when it's exercising the function of registration. But also this type of consciousness can function as the rebirth, bhavanga, and death consciousness. On those occasions, it's said to be door freed or occurring outside any of the sense doors. And then the sublime resultants, that is, the resultants pertaining to the fine material realm, the 5 resultant jhana consciousness, and the 4 resultant formless attainment resultant consciousness, always occur as door freed, because those types of consciousness only have 3 functions: rebirth, bhavanga, and death. So when a being is reborn in, say, the fine material realm, it's reborn, say, with a first jhana consciousness, resultant consciousness. So that first jhana resultant consciousness occurs as rebirth linking, it occurs through the course of life as bhavanga, and then it occurs again at the very end as the death consciousness. Yeah.
Is it possible to have investigation that is neutral? I mean, isn't it conditioned by our experiences and when we investigate, in other words?
By equanimity, it just means neutral feeling. It's a feeling which is neither pleasant nor painful.
That is before we determine...
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now I think we could take a few questions and then we'll have a break. So I see you can't even keep your hand down. So yeah, you have to speak through the microphone.
Thank you, Bendy. I have a question about the relation between jhana and the door. The relation between jhana and the door. Like you meditate into jhana, like one jhana. You stay there for an hour.
Yeah.
During that 1 hour, the no door happen because the door free. Basically, 5 senses all stopped, and then the conscious mind doesn't rise up. So basically, you know what exactly it is for hour, then the mindset is just stay. You know what I mean? It's
in that case, it's occurring entirely through the mind door. So the jhanic consciousness is occurring through the mind door.
But nothing come in between. Like then it's stable in one mind.
Yeah, we're going to come to that tomorrow.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
Yeah, you have to be patient. We can't cover everything in one session. Okay, this gentleman here with the beard.
What about hunger and thirst and physical sensations? Is that a door? Or?
I would say that those are probably body originating as body forms of body consciousness. Okay. But then when one recognizes that one has hunger or thirst, then it's coming into mind consciousness. That's the way I would understand it.
Is that a door?
Excuse me?
Is that a door? Body door?
Yeah, it's originating through the body door. And then as one sort of gets a clear recognition of one's hunger or thirst, then it's turning into a mind door process. But we're going to come to the process, the different processes of consciousness tomorrow. So, some of those questions will get answered tomorrow. Do you have another question?
Bhante, I'm wondering if you could distinguish between the mind and the brain.
The mind and the brain?
Yeah. I'm having trouble because without the brain, you're not conscious. Right?
Okay. I mean, this, like everything pertaining to the brain comes when we get to the section on bases.
Okay.
Yeah. That relates to bases rather than doors. And then I think you'll see the distinction between door and base. Okay, I think we should take according to the schedule, I think we're due for a break now. According to my body, I'm also due for a break. Yeah, it says 3:10 to 3:25, we have tea break.